Many people are aware of just how awesome and flexible Supabase is when it comes to being a backend for your app, but not many people, including probably yourself, are aware of Supabase's other superpowers, the ability to help you build complex functionality with ease and in record time. Well, today I will share with you an awesome technique that pretty much every consumer and even business app can leverage. Now, before we get started, as always, all the apps and all the resources that I discuss on this channel, you can view them and or clone them via our amazing Patreon community. And if you're still not a member of our incredible, rapidly growing Patreon community, then you can learn more about it via the first link in the description below the video. Now, Supabase is not merely a backend for your data, but a suite of different services. One of them gives you the ability to not merely read and write your data, but also the ability to manipulate it in some innovative and powerful ways. And so if you jump over to your Supabase dashboard here, you're going to be seeing the regular things, the usual suspects, your tables, your SQL queries, things like that. But if you click here on this database section here, and you select extensions, you can essentially install powerful extensions that can work with your data. And so if you scroll down, you're going to be seeing tons and tons of amazing extensions that are essentially free features and free functionality to your apps, right? That your apps can leverage. And one of these extensions that we're going to be talking about today that can do lots and lots of amazing things for absolutely free without you really having to do a lot is this PostGIS extension. Now, this extension gives your Supabase power to work with geometry and geography, spatial types, and functions. And what that essentially means is that your data is going to be location aware. You're essentially be able to store various location coordinates with your data and kind of work with those location coordinates to provide your users with some amazing features and functionality, as you're going to be seeing a little bit later in the video. And so once you select and enable this extension here, you'll be able to store additional metadata in your tables. And so if we jump to our table editor here, and let's say you want to create a new table, well, you can click here, create a new table. And if you scroll down, you can add a column, and now you have other data types. Okay, so in addition to your standard data types, such as integers, text, varchar, etc., you have all of these new ones, such as box2D, geography here, geometry, and a lot of amazing data types that essentially enable you to describe your data in some amazing new ways. And so what I did here was I created a table called locations, okay? And the purpose of this table is to store various landmarks here, okay? So what we have here is 20 landmarks located in New York City, okay? Empire State Building, Statue of Liberty. And this second field is this geography field that's provided to us by this new amazing extensions. Now, how exactly do we populate this data? Well, this is actually very simple as well. So if we jump here, you can see that I have a query here called insert location data. And that's essentially all I'm doing, right? I'm saying insert into public locations, which is that table, name and location. Now for name, we just have the actual name of the landmark. But for the location, you have to be using this format here, okay? You have to say st_point and then provide the coordinates with the longitude first and the latitude second. Now you can use ChatGPT to generate all of this for you. Now this here covers the first part of setting up your landmarks with their associated coordinates, okay? Now in the second part, we are going to be doing the actual magic using Supabase functions. Now, keep in mind, what we're about to discuss are Supabase functions, not Supabase edge functions, which is a completely different beast. Now, if you jump to our PostGIS extension documentation, you can see that in the first part, they're simply populating the table with the name of the landmark as well as the corresponding coordinates. But in the second part, this is where things get interesting, because here, you can leverage Supabase functions to get you specific information about your landmarks as related to something else. So for example, you can order them by distance. You can also get all of your locations within a bounding box, which is something that I'm going to be showing you in a real proof of concept app a little bit later in the video. And so this is extremely powerful. And all you need to do is implement these functions. And so if we jump back to my Supabase database, you can see that I've done this as well. So here's our first function here that gets me all the landmarks in a view. Okay, so all I need to provide is the actual bounded box, what the user sees, and it's going to tell me how many locations are there. And the second function is called nearby locations, and all you need to do is specify the target coordinate, and it's going to tell you which locations are nearby, as well as how far each of the locations are from the specified coordinate. So all you need to do is go to this documentation here, copy and paste these functions, paste them here, run this, and then if you go back to your database tab and click on functions, you're going to be seeing these two functions here. And what Supabase functions allow you to do is that they allow you to work with your data in a very dynamic way. So they're a lot more powerful than merely querying your database or updating your database or anything like that. They allow you to send dynamic variables, and this is ideal if you are building an app that needs to interface with this data, and the values that you're going to be sending to your data are dynamic, meaning that you do not know them beforehand. And this is how it usually is. A user is using our app, they're inputting some variables that we cannot know beforehand. And this is why you need to be using Supabase functions, because they allow you to access your data in a dynamic fashion. Now, once you have these functions set up, you can now invoke these functions and get your data back. Now, if you jump here to this API docs here, you're going to be seeing your tables here, as well as ways of accessing this data. But if you head down to the section below called stored procedures, you're going to be seeing your Supabase functions here. And keep in mind that stored procedures is a synonym for Supabase functions. So anytime that you see stored procedures, think of Supabase functions. Anytime you think of Supabase functions, think of stored procedures. They're exactly the same thing. And so if I click on location and view, which is that Supabase function we just defined a couple of moments ago, and you click on bash here, you'll be able to invoke your Supabase function via a REST API. And this enables you to invoke your Supabase function from pretty much anywhere in a dynamic function. And this is exactly what we want, because we are going to be invoking this function from our FlutterFlow front-end app. Now, if you head down to nearby locations, you're going to be seeing the exact same screen, except you're going to be having perhaps different arguments and a different function name. And this essentially allows you to invoke your Supabase function in a very similar fashion as one would invoke a function on their own app, except now you are invoking a function that's residing somewhere else. And so here I am using my HTTP tester tool, and I've put in the function here, and I've also entered locations, and we're using the locations in view function, which is going to give us a list of locations that are located inside the bounding box. Okay, so I gave it some coordinates, the minimum latitude, minimum longitude, as well as maximum latitude and maximum longitude. And the idea is it's going to spit out all the locations inside this bounding box somewhere in Manhattan, New York City. Now, when we execute this function, we get 9 locations that are located inside of this bounding box. Now, if you recall, we have 20 locations in total, and this means 9 of these locations are inside of this bounding box. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, this is great and all, but what's a real-world practical application of this functionality? How can I leverage this functionality in order to have an app that's easy to use but still powerful, so that the users can find the locations that they want? Well, I'm glad you asked, because now I want to show you a proof of concept app that I built using these two functions here that do some incredible things. And so now that we have this working here, let me go ahead and jump into my FlutterFlow app builder, which is my favorite no-code builder. And let me show you a proof of concept app that I built using these two functions that, in my opinion, should be used by every consumer and even some business apps anytime you need some kind of mapping features. Okay, so here's the app. And before I show you how I actually build this app out, let's go ahead and run this app. So let's go ahead and create a new session here. All right, so here's the app. And on this first screen, we are working with locations on the map. Okay, so here we are seeing a map of Manhattan, New York, and it's telling us pan the map to begin. So if we pan the map, we're going to be seeing a list of locations in this box here. Okay, so it says here 15 locations found, and you can kind of scroll through locations, and you should be seeing 15 locations in this view. So essentially, the user is looking at 15 locations. Now, if I zoom in, we're no longer going to be seeing 15 locations. We are seeing 5 locations. Okay, so if I keep zooming in, guess how many locations we're seeing? 1 location. This is Madison Square Garden, and it says here Madison Square Garden. So this is the right location. Now let's say I zoom out, and now we're seeing 2 locations, right? We see this one and we see this one. This is the Empire State Building. If I scroll over, as you can see, it says here Empire State Building, and now the map has refreshed and it says 4 locations. Now let's say I pan over to the right, and now it's telling us 4 locations, right? That is because we're seeing 2 here and 2 here. So if I come over here, we have 3 locations, right? 3 locations here. So if I zoom out, now we have 12 locations. But if I go all the way to Queens, we have 1 location. But if I keep going to like Long Island, we have no locations, right? Because there's no location. So if I zoom out all the way, we see all the 20 locations. And at the core, we are taking advantage of that Supabase function that returns the list of locations in the bounded box. Okay, so we are looking at this box, we're looking at this view, and we are calculating how many locations are located in this viewable region, right? Because we don't want to display locations that the user cannot see, right? So here we have 3 locations. There's really no reason to show locations that the user cannot see. And this is all dynamic. This is all happening in real time. And this is lightning fast because we are leveraging Supabase as our backend, but also Supabase as the logic as well via that Supabase function. Okay, now let me show you a second demo, right? So if we click on this tab here, we have distance from location, right? So it says here, tap a point on the map. So let's say I zoom in and I tap right here. Okay, now it's telling us 20 places found. And this is the list of the places. Okay, so now it's listing all the places. Okay, we're not just listing the places here, but we are sorting the places by the distance from the point that was clicked. Okay, so if I click here, it's going to tell us 20 locations found, and here it lists the locations and it lists the distance, right? It's essentially sorted by the distance in ascending order. And so the distances are increasing. Okay, so now if I zoom out and let's say I go to Queens, I click here, now we have Flushing Meadows, which is 3.7 kilometers away right here, but all the other locations are in Manhattan. That is why they're farther away, right? So if we jump over, let's say we zoom out and we click somewhere in Long Island right here, and now we are seeing Flushing Meadows, which is the closest. It's 58 kilometers. Bronx Zoo is 60 kilometers. Yankee Stadium is 65, etc., etc. And now if I zoom out and I click somewhere, I don't know, let's say I click somewhere in Florida, like near Miami or something like that. Now it says Coney Island is, 1,700 kilometers. Statue of Liberty is, etc., 17, etc. So they're fairly far away. Now, another thing that you can do is you can use a radius here, right? You can essentially specify that you only care about locations that are within a 1 kilometer radius or 5 kilometer radius, right? So let's say I click here on this Upper East Side, which is where I'm located, and now I'm seeing locations. And let's say I'm only interested in seeing locations 5 kilometer within a 5 kilometer radius. So I'm going to enter 5 and I'm going to submit, and now I'm seeing 12 places found. And these are the places that are within a 5 kilometer radius. Okay, now if I enter 1, it's going to show me locations that are within a 1 kilometer radius. So in this case, we only have this Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is this thing right here. We're still seeing these ones because I'm not limiting them, but in this list view, I'm only showing you the locations that the user is going to be interested in. So if I put like 3, now we have 8 places, right? We still have the Met, this museum here, which is first on the list. Then we have Central Park, we have, which is right here. Then we have Fifth Avenue, which is, you know, somewhere there probably. And then we have Museum of Modern Art, etc., etc. And so this second screen leverages that other Supabase function that allows you to get a list of your locations from the table by distance from another point, right? Because if you recall, if you go back to your stored procedures or Supabase functions, and you click on nearby locations, you see it accepts 2 arguments, right? And that is the point that we need to compare the other locations against. And that is why when I click on the point, we are essentially passing this point. Now here, we are passing more parameters, and that is because we need to pass the bounding box. And if you want to pass a bounding box, you need to pass 4 arguments, okay? And as a result, we have this really, really nice flow. And I know like apps like Airbnb use it and Zillow uses it, and pretty much all the apps that use maps and they need to kind of show, you know, useful information about the maps, about, you know, different restaurants maybe within a 1 kilometer radius of the user's location. Well, guess what? They're going to be using this functionality, and this functionality is also very, very useful, right? Because the user is browsing the map and it's updating the map in real time, right? So here we have 2 points. I scroll here, I see 2 points. I zoom in, and guess what I see? I see just 1 point. And so both of these features are a must-have anytime you're building location-aware map apps. They're absolutely a must-have. It's not good enough to simply display a list of locations in a static fashion. This dynamic behavior is exactly what the users are looking for. And that is why this is an absolute must-have in your apps. Now, how exactly is this implemented? How does this magic work? Well, let's jump back into my FlutterFlow app builder and let me show you exactly how all of this magic works. And keep in mind, if you're a member of our Patreon community, you'll be able to view and or clone this app so that way you can see exactly what's happening. Now, this app has 2 pages. The first one tells you the locations within the map's bounding box. And this is this map locations, right? This is this one here. And the second one tells you the distance from the point, from a specific point on the map. So let's take a look at the first screen first. How exactly is it happening? Well, first of all, we need to have these stored procedures or Supabase functions implemented as API calls. So if I jump into my API calls, I have 2 API calls. The first one gets us the locations in a view, okay? The second one gets us the locations nearby, basically from a specific point. And so this get locations in the view, this is the API call that you can get here, right? So if you jump over here and you go into your API docs, you can simply click here, you can click on bash, and you also want to make sure that you specify this anon key. And then all you need to do is take all of this information and copy it to your app. Okay, so you input the headers, you input the body, you also input the variables. Remember, this is dynamic, you know, your variables are constantly changing. So these are variables that you input here. And that's pretty much all you have to do. And so now you can go into response and test. You can enter your sample bounded box. So here we have some sample coordinates representing a bounded box in a specific area. So in this case, this is Manhattan. And if I do my test API call, I'm going to get a list of locations that are essentially in this bounded box. And all the calculations, right? This is all of this tricky calculation is done by that Supabase extension, right? So you don't need to worry about all this. And this is really the power of it, right? And the second API call, if you go into your response and test, you just need to enter 1 coordinate this time. And this is the point that you want to compare and see if other locations are within the radius. And so I enter this point here, I do test API call, and I'm going to get a list of locations from that point sorted by the distance in ascending order, right? From lowest to highest. Now, this here is in meters, right? This is not kilometers, right? So this is in meters. And so if you divide it by 1,000, you're going to get this in kilometers. And obviously, if you're in the US or in the UK and you want to be working with miles, all you need to do is convert this into miles. And actually in the app, as you're going to see in a second, I am converting this into kilometers by simply dividing it by 1,000, okay? So when you divide it by 1,000, you're going to get kilometers, right? So the Statue of Liberty is only 1.8 kilometers away from this point. This One World Trade Center is only 2.7 kilometers away from this point, and etc., etc., etc. for the rest of these landmarks as well. So once you have these API calls set up, the next part is actually building your app. So how exactly is this app built? So if you recall, we have some interesting functionality happening, right? So for the maps, you can pan the map and it updates itself, or you can click on a point on the map and it updates itself. Now, FlutterFlow provides a Google Map widget that you can use, but that is a very, very simple Google Map widget. It does not furnish you with information as to if the user is panning the map or if the user is clicking on the map. And so what I did was I created my own custom Google Maps widgets that, in addition to displaying the map, they also provide the user when the map is being panned, as well as when somebody clicks on the map. And it also provides the point that was clicked, as well as the bounding rectangle when the user is panning the map, because we need that information in order to get the landmarks, to show the number of landmarks, as well as to show the actual landmarks that are in that bounded rectangle. Okay, so if we come over here to our custom code section, we have two custom widgets, right? We have custom Google Maps here, and this thing handles the panning. So if we scroll down here, we are creating the map, but we are also tracking when the map is being panned. We have this callback here called on-camera idle that tells the app when the user has finished panning the map. And that way, when it's finished, we can get all of these coordinates, right? We can get all of these coordinates of the bounded rectangle and send us back, right? And the way that we do it is if you go over here and you select this widget here, you scroll down, we have this onBounds change. And this is an action argument that comes back to us anytime the user pans the map. And we have some actions here. We're updating page state, and we are doing this API call, right? Because we have the new coordinates. So now we can execute the API call and get the new locations located within that bounded rectangle, right? And now we are updating our page state. We have locations here, and we're also setting new markers, right? So if we come over here, we have location type, and we're storing the name, latitude, longitude, and the distance. Now, if we come to our page here and we look at the page state variables, we have the bounded points of the rectangle, we have the markers, and we have the location. So anytime the user pans the map, we get all of these, we set all of these, and we get the list of the landmarks from the API call. And once we get the results from the API call, we set the markers and we also set the new locations. And that way you have this really, really clean behavior, okay? Now, for the second feature here, this distance locations, it works similarly, but not exactly in the same way. So I have another custom Google Maps widget, right? So if you come over here and we have this new custom Google Maps widget, and the purpose of the second Google Maps widget is no longer to track if the user is panning the map and get back to us with the corners of the rectangle. It now is to track where the user clicks on the map. Okay, so if you scroll down here, this time we have this on tap event, and that reacts anytime the user clicks on the map. And the purpose here is to come back to us and tell us the coordinate, okay? Because we need that one coordinate, so that way we can send it away to our Supabase function and get back a list of landmarks with the distances, with distance from that point. Okay, so now if you come over here and you select the map and you scroll on, we have this untapped here, right? And now we have a flow that is executed when the user clicks anywhere in the map, right? So right away, we execute this API call with the variables that we get back as part of this flow, right? Remember, with custom widgets and custom actions in FlutterFlow, you can create a custom callback, which is called an action parameter. And you can specify if not only do you want to execute that callback, but also if you want to get some variable, some data back from your custom widget or a custom action. And so in this case, we want to get the latitude and the longitude of the point that was clicked, right? We need to know the point. That is the only thing that we need to know, because once we know it, we can happily execute this REST API call. We're going to get the result. And now once we have the result, we can, set new markers, and we can also update locations. And the reason for that is we want to display these locations here, right? These are dynamic. And so once we have these locations displayed here, everything is really simple. We have this input radius here, whose purpose is it to simply update a page state variable that the list is going to filter on, right? So we update the page state variable with the inputted radius here. And then when we list all of these things, we can filter them by the user specified radius, right? So what we are doing is we're taking locations and we're using this filter list functionality that is built in. And what we have here is we are simply looking at the items in the list, and we want to make sure that the distance meters is less than or equal to the code expression. What code expression? Well, this code expression takes the value and multiplies it by 1,000. So instead of taking the meters and converting it to kilometers, I'm actually doing the opposite in this case. I'm taking the radius, and which is in kilometers, and I'm converting it into meters, right? Which is the exact same thing, but it's easier in this case because we only have one radius, but we have lots and lots of landmarks. So it's a lot easier to just convert that one radius as opposed to converting each of the landmarks into kilometers, right? That way we can just convert the radius into meters instead. So this is exactly what we're doing. And we have this filter condition that is essentially is going to tell us all the landmarks that are within a user specified radius, right? And because this is a page state variable, anytime we update it, all of this thing is rebuilt, right? So if we select this right here, this input, we come in here, you see how it says rebuild current page. If you just do no rebuild, then you're not going to be seeing that refresh. So you definitely want to make sure that you do that. And as a result, we have this really, really cool flow, right? We can zoom out and we can see, 10 places near me. I can zoom in and I'm going to be seeing just Madison Square Garden. I can come back here and I can, click here and I'm going to be seeing all the places here. And let's say I zoom in and I only care about, within 1 kilometer, and I only see this Met here. So if I zoom out, this is this Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is less than 8 kilometer from my point here, okay? So both of these features are super useful. I will even go as far as to say that they are a must-have when you're building location-aware apps. And a little tip here, if you want to get the user's current location, that is actually very, very easy, right? Because all you want to do is anytime you need to use the current location, so let's say you want to specify it here or you want to list it here, all you need to do is come in here and you can find it within your variables. So if I type location, we have this current device location, and that gives you the user's current location. So this way, you can implement this here, and the app is going to get permissions from the user so that they're allowed to get the user's current location. And that way, you can use the user's current location with everything else that I talked about here. So this way you can immediately display all the places near the user's current location instead of having them click a point, right? Which is something that you also may want to implement in your apps. This is actually very, very easy to do, and everything else is already provided to you here. So if you want to use current device location instead of having the user click somewhere, you can do that very easily as well. And these two features are merely scraping the top of the surface, because you can do a lot of other interesting things if you are are going to be building location-aware map apps. Now, the app that I showed you does a lot of things. There's a lot of things happening here in the front end. There's lots of things happening in the back end. Plus, I also use ChatGPT to help me build the back end and also help me build the front end by helping me code some of the custom widgets and some of the other things as well. And so if you guys want to get access to this app, as well as get access to my Chat GPT Convo, and that way you can see exactly what was going on in my head, how exactly I structured everything. And in many ways, I feel that Chat GPT Convo might be even more interesting than the actual app that I demonstrated here. If you guys want to get access to that, I'm going to be making all of that available in my Patreon community. And so if you're not yet a member, you definitely need to join, because not only will you get access to the resources talked about here, you're also going to get access to all my other apps that I talked about on the channel. They're all there. You can go ahead and view them. You can clone them. You can ask questions below. You can interact with other members of the community. Plus, you're going to get access to extra content. You're going to be supporting this channel and supporting my work. And that provides a lot of motivations for making these amazing videos, as well as making some additional content for you guys. And so if you're getting value from this channel, you're going to get even more value when you join our amazing Patreon community. And so if all of this sounds good, check out the first link in the description below and go ahead and join our incredible community.